Hi, and welcome to this Q&A on working on an impactful thesis with Dev. I'm Sofia Labadeva, and I'll be the MC for this session. This session will be a live Q&A session where Dev will respond to your questions. At first, he's going to do a little bit of a presentation first. You can also submit questions through the swap card live discussion feature. After 45 minutes, we'll bring the session to an end. But now I would like to introduce the speaker for the session. Dev leads the management of the coaching services at Effective Thesis. He aims to ensure that the coaching services are helpful, nurturing, and constructive for all students. Dev is currently a PhD candidate, One Health Models of Disease at the University of Edinburgh, and is conducting research on biosecurity and law. Let's get started.
Hi, everyone. So just to start off, I'm going to start with a few slides to introduce you to Effective Thesis and what we do. And then after that, I'll answer a few questions on working on an impactful thesis. So Effective Thesis is a nonprofit that tries to direct students towards impactful research topics. And how we do this is by coaching students towards thesis topics that might be more impactful than others. We are guided by the principles of effective altruism, which is why we are here today. And we want to support students by helping them at the start of their research careers towards topics that might be more significantly impactful than others. So we provide a few services that help to support students. Our primary service is coaching, where we have someone who's not an expert in the area you're interested in, someone like me, who's head of coaching, to talk to a student who is, or a researcher who is sort of an expert in the area they're looking at. And with that, we start to have a discussion on some early career guidance plans, some help on how to direct themselves towards a more impactful research career, and also then connect them with someone from our network of experts that might be a expert in the area they're looking at, or might be someone who's able to connect them with people who are like really impactful or who do impactful work within those areas. Sometimes that may come from career advice or from advice in improving your arguments themselves, or sometimes it's a way to make your thesis more impactful by connecting you with the right audience for the research that you're looking at. This depends on what stage of research you're at. Ideally, we talk to researchers who are still deciding what their thesis topic is, so we can help you decide what is an impactful research topic. We've also identified a few bottlenecks while doing research. One of them is when you're trying to do research into a niche topic that is neglected, as several topics are within the effective altruism community, we find that finding a supervisor is one of those bottlenecks. And so we've developed a database where you can look through to find a relevant supervisor that matches one of the cause areas you're interested in. For example, if you're looking at AI safety as a potential career path and are trying to do a PhD in AI safety, you might find it difficult to find the right supervisors that are aligned with AI safety interest. And our supervisor database, while not exhaustive, is a good place to start to find the right supervisors and the right key people, which will help you then find other key people. We have built other resources and collated other resources on our website that help support this endeavor on itself, and also have advice written on this that you can easily access on our website. We also spend time trying to connect you with other students, and we do this in two ways. First, through the coaching, where I can think of students or look at students who might have similar interest and connect you with each other, so you can support yourselves through this research process that can sometimes be lonely or sometimes be tough, especially if you're new. And the loneliness doesn't go away if you're old, actually, but it feels even more when you're newer to the idea of research. And the other way we do this is by running a community platform. On this platform, we have quite a few fun things going on. One of them is trying to find yourselves buddies for accountability, or maybe trying to talk to other students who might have already enter the program that you are interested in, especially if it's like a PhD application program. You might be able to reach out to someone who is already in the same program, or who might be at the same university and might offer some time to like have a look at your proposal, or might just be happy to give you some advice. Sometimes it's really useful to talk to someone who might be working in the same lab as you are working in, or maybe working in the same with the same supervisor in some way, that you can get some like internal like aspects to what working with the supervisor is like. And our community platform like creates a space for you to do that, and also creates a space for you to have discussions that are about your research, and have space for you to ask questions you might not feel comfortable asking to everyone else, but rather just a small number of people who will be having the same questions as you will easily find on our community platform. We also have a database that offers funding opportunities. This is just a collation or a collection of different funders and information about those funders that allow you to see which funders within the effective altruism atmosphere are providing funding for PhD opportunities, so that you can easily go through that. And we hope that this helps reduce the bottleneck of finding funding while trying to do impactful research. This year, we've also just finished our Exceptional Research Award. We'll be announcing the winners of the Exceptional Research Award in a month's time. And that's quite exciting, because we were hoping to inspire more people to look at impactful research topics through this award, and also just see what comes out of it. So I was talking about how our coaching works, and one of the things we have done pretty well is to actually develop a number of research directions that are inspired by EA cause areas. And some of them, as you can see on the slides, here, very important ones, but also as you can see, for example, consumer research into alternative proteins targets disciplines that are within academic frameworks such as business or economics that look into consumer research related to alternative proteins. But we also go into data science or computer science with human-aligned artificial intelligence. Sometimes we have a lot of physics students for whom we try to develop research directions such as exploring extreme climate change scenarios, and improving health and well-being metrics applies to several other disciplines. But as you can see, we also at the same time try to do the opposite and try to encourage you to get out of your discipline. So if you're interested in data science, maybe I'm suggesting for you to go towards improving health and well-being metrics or exploring extreme climate change scenarios, because research can sometimes be quite narrow in disciplines, but we want to encourage interdisciplinary research as we go along. I'm seeing that a few questions are already coming in the chat. That's really exciting, so thank you. So how we ideally provide coaching is, first, you start by seeing some research directions on our website and exploring our resource page. Our resource page gives you all the tools that might be helpful for doing research. This could be AI research assistants, all the way to where can you find easy data sets to use for analysis. And you go through this process that's on the slide right now. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this. Rather, I want to spend the time answering all of your questions. Some of the things that you will experience while doing coaching is, you will get some guidance. You can start by asking for some questions that are related to some guidance you're finding or looking for in this session itself. And after that, we also try to connect you with opportunities, because we have an opportunities newsletter, but also me as a coach, I try to see what opportunities are most relevant to you that are going on within the sphere right now. Sometimes those come in the form of fellowships. Sometimes those come in the form of PhD applications. Sometimes they come in the form of just scholarship applications in general that can also be undergraduate related sometimes. And sometimes they are just to connect you with the right network that you may need. And this depends individually on what you're looking for at that moment, and also trying to provide you with some relevant resources to get you started if you haven't really started doing research yet. As we know, sometimes you need the right network to build career capital, especially within academia, and we hope to provide the platform for you to do that. This is some of our team, and if you're already interested in coaching, you can scan the QR code and apply here, and follow us on Twitter. Now I'm going to start answering some questions, I think.
Yeah, sounds great. Hi. So we're going to take some questions from the chat. As we're answering them, don't hesitate to keep sending those questions and upvote the questions that you want answered most. So the first question that we had actually before this session even started was from someone who says, "Hi, I will soon write a thesis in ethics of human technology relation or interaction, which will not involve experiments, but rather will involve reading or like other philosophical and practical applied papers before coming to my own conclusions. Is there an effective topic in that?"
So great question, Sarah. So to start with, I think there's definitely some effective topic in there that you can explore. One of the ways you could do it is to go through an in-depth coaching session where we can discuss what ideas you have. After that, I can connect you with someone. Off the top of my head, just seeing this much without asking you more questions, I think there's ways for you to connect this with human-aligned artificial intelligence and just long-termism in general. And how can you look towards human-technology relation interaction more from a long-termist perspective? And that's something that you can easily incorporate as part of your thesis in some form, just to get started, or just to get you thinking a lot more about what are long-termist ideas and how can you start to bring them within academic research. And this is a good start. We can talk more about this within a coaching session, or if you would like some more wide answers, you can post it on our community platform and you can find more answers as comments for it as well. I hope that starts to answer your question to some extent. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, the next question that we have is there funding for undergraduate theses related to EA?
Thank you so much for that question. I think there are some organizations that do provide funding for undergraduate degrees in general, like OpenPhil do, some scholarships, but in terms of undergraduate thesis related to EA, so essentially you will not get funding to do the thesis itself, but rather if you want to spend time after, like you graduate and then think the work that you're doing is impactful and you want to spend a bit more time trying to make it into a publishable thesis in some way, there is funding available within the EA infrastructure to provide that. I've coached a couple of students. One of them was working on AMR research and got funding to be able to carry out their research and turn them into 2 publications. And that was done very well. And so as long as you are doing research into something that's impactful, there is opportunity out there to apply for funding. I cannot guarantee that you will get funding, obviously, because I'm not a funder, but I rather am someone who can say that there's never any harm in asking for funding if you believe that there is impact within getting that funding and for getting that funding. And that's an important question to self-reflect on. And sometimes getting coaching can help you run that reflection, but also we might be able to connect you with someone who can help you answer whether this research is worth exploring and taking forward as an undergrad into a publication in some form, or maybe even for your career. There's some like considerations such as whether that's the best use of your time, whether you might be better off applying for some funding to get a master's program that you might be doing this research more thoroughly. And there's a few other considerations that come in from a balance of what you're doing in the long term of your career rather than the research alone.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. So the next question that we have is, in addition to writing an effective thesis myself at grad level, I'm considering starting an EA student group. Are there any tips for EA student groups to motivate people to write an effective thesis?
Fantastic question. I've never received that question before, so this is quite exciting. Thanks so much. I don't know how to pronounce your name, so I'm just going to try Somano. First of all, as a coach, I want to say, make sure you balance your time well. You don't want to experience burnout by working too hard on running a student group while writing a thesis at the same time. They're both highly time-consuming activities. It's important to get a balance in that, but there are definitely tips and ways to get EA student groups to motivate people to write effective theses. First of all, we can share with you some slides and run you through a talk you can give to motivate people to look at this. Second of all, you can invite someone from Effective Thesis to give that talk. Third of all, I think I mentioned this from our community platform, but sometimes accountability buddies can be really helpful. So if you can set up accountability buddy groups within accountability buddy matching within your EA student group itself, they might be more motivated to work on topics that they have someone to discuss this with and someone who can keep them in check. Fourth of all, this works quite well in student groups I've seen before, is that when you're running discussion groups on certain topics or certain themes that are consistent through a semester, you're more likely to get more people interested in doing that research, because then you're getting people to think and discuss about that topic every week with a group of people, and they also get to do research about it at the same time. So this is like some really easy, low-cost ways to motivate students are by telling students that this is a good way to do your thesis, and then they might be interested in doing it. But it's not always apparent unless you bring it up, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Awesome. The next question that we have is, what year level for undergraduate students would you recommend for one-on-one or for one to take the step in submitting their application for coaching?
Cool. Great question. So essentially, it would be good for you to apply for coaching approximately 3 months before you're deciding on what topic you want to do for your thesis. And any times after those 3 months may work. I would say try not to apply for coaching 1 week before to decide a topic, but leave yourself some space to take the time to really think about it and explore. So you might not have to do coaching 3 months before if, for example, you've explored a couple of the research directions quite well on your own time and just want to have coaching after you've sort of engaged with some of the research already. If you're in year one, then of your undergraduate degree, then there might not be as much value for you to do a coaching session yet, although you could have one to like learn more from someone about what to do, and then have one again closer to the time that you're doing your thesis, rather than thinking this is your year one coaching for your thesis. It's more for your undergrad career itself. That's sort of a balancing act. We have coached people at all levels, so we don't refuse someone because they're too early, but rather we ask the ones who come early to keep in touch or reapply. And we've had people reapply from undergrad to masters. Like now we've had at least a couple of people who've applied more than twice. So that's quite fun as well.
Great. Yeah, that's really helpful. So the next question that we have is, what do you believe is the biggest research gap in ethics?
Wow, that's a huge question. So Ryan, I'm not an expert in the ethics sphere all on my own, so I won't be able to tell you off the top of my head what is the biggest gap in ethics. But also ethics is such a wide field. I am a researcher in bioethics myself, so like if you asked me about bioethics, I'd be talking about biosafety and biosecurity. But within the wider form of ethics, I think you could be looking into several things. Like there's a lot of discussion on population ethics. There's a lot of discussion on just the ethics of doing certain forms of research and whether we should be doing dual use research and how do we like work on that. There's so many questions within that. But we could identify what is the biggest research gap for you to work on in a coaching session that fits your current skill set. What is your comparative advantage? How can you improve the research within that area? And that's more of the question that you want to deal with, rather than what is the biggest gap overall. Rather, what is the gap that you can work most with and create the most impact in at the moment, given that you yourself come with a certain skill set that you come with to the table with, rather than you can do everything all at once. Rather, you need to take the time. And sometimes if you identify the gap that you want to work on, for example, if you want to work on AI alignment in the future, then your thesis can be a way to build the skills necessary to do that kind of work. I hope that answers your questions and brings you more questions to ask, because I'm sure it will.
Great. So we have another question. So bachelor's and master's theses typically don't get published. Is this something that Effective Thesis focuses on?
Thanks for that question, Sumana. So you're right, they don't typically get published, and there's many different reasons for this. For example, at an undergrad thesis, you're not writing to publish, you're rather writing to develop your research skills and get into a master's program of some sort. If you spend time turning that into a thesis, into a publication, that would be good. Effective Thesis does not spend time trying to help you turn that into a publication. But sometimes if you're working on something really impactful and you're really motivated to publish it, we can connect you with someone who can help you, or give you some advice on how to turn it into a publication, or whether it's worth turning into a publication. Because at the end of the day, you have to think about who the audience is for your research, and that's really important. So, for example, I had a student who I coached who wrote an undergrad thesis, and they wrote their undergrad thesis on geoengineering, and their audience that they wanted to focus on for their undergrad was on the EA forum. So they wrote their thesis, and after they finished their thesis, they turned that thesis into something that's much more reader-friendly and user-friendly for a forum post rather than for a publication. And that made their research much more widely read than a journal publication may have been, because the journal publication may have only been read by people who visit the journal that they managed to publish in. And still, being an undergrad comes with certain negative views that I don't appreciate. I think you could write research and do research that is strong at any level, but you might not get top level academics reading your undergrad level journal right away, which is a reality that you have to face. But for example, if you're in your audience, if you're targeting people who might read it on the EA forum, you're likely to get everyone who's interested in the topic to read it, rather than looking at who you are and what you've qualified to read it. Just read it for that value itself. And so the question is, who's your audience and how can you write for that audience? And we try to make you think about that question, because impact doesn't only come by making it into a journal publication. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And that's a context specific thing. It's quite important to know, for example, I'm going to be doing my PhD, some parts of my PhD thesis on developing tools and recommendations for scientists. And so my audience for some of my research is not really going to be in a journal publication, but rather aimed at NGOs and policy activists that might be able to make those recommendations listened to within scientists' labs and such. So that's just an example of how even at the PhD level, I have to think about the audience I'm writing and researching for. And sure, I can turn that into a publication at some point, but the audience I'm doing the research for is still in my mind, because I need to achieve that goal. Otherwise, it won't have as much impact as I want it to.
So following up on that, the next question that we have is, Do you have tools or tips to help narrow down possible thesis topics other than applying for a coaching session?
Great question, Zoe. So one of the biggest critiques you're going to get from your supervisor or from a coach is that your topic is currently too wide. So that's the perfect question. So some of the things you can think about, and I think there's a talk right after me on think local, act global, that's going to be talking a little bit more about how you can approach a question from a narrow angle, but still be quite impactful, especially if you're from a global South country. So for example, any topic that you're thinking of can be narrowed down with some basics. A, geographically, where is that research going to be located? B, within the topic that you're researching, is it just a sub-target of that? For example, if you're thinking about an intervention, if you're thinking about an intervention in, thinking of an example, if you're thinking about an intervention within the global health sector and you just say, I want to solve diabetes, even though that's just a random example, you're not going to be able to solve all of diabetes. There's specific diseases within diabetes that also you are going to be looking at and targeting to solve. And so you have to narrow it down just from subject-specific reasoning as well. So another better example than diabetes, I think, is if you're looking into trying to do biosecurity work in and when you're trying to do biosecurity work, you're going to realize that a lot of biosecurity rules and regulations are quite context and geographically specific. You're not going to be able to take on a world comparison. Rather, you might have to pick what is going on in the UK. How can I fix this? What is going on in India? How can I fix this? Together, you're collectively trying to build knowledge and interventions that might be useful. But you have to remember that research is not trying to create the intervention. That's not academic research. Academic research is going to be answering a question that answers a question that answers a question that answers a question that creates an intervention. So you're going through a whole space and trying to remind yourself that you're not trying to solve the world with this question, but rather you're trying to answer another question and then answering another question. So a good way to reverse engineer that is to ask a question of the question and ask a question of the question to help narrow down what is the question you can actually take in a narrow space. And there's another thing that researchers often try to advise you, and top supervisors will tell you this, is research is like an upside down Christmas tree. So what you're trying to do is basically you're starting wide, then you narrow, then you widen again, then you narrow again, then you widen again, then you narrow again, you widen again, you narrow again until you reach the narrow topic you're looking at. So it's a lot of reading and a lot of literature review that reaches you there. But it's hard effort. I hope that was a really long-winded way to answer your question, Zoe, but I hope that answers it to some extent. If not, then I guess apply for a coaching session and we'll try to narrow it down.
I think since we're here, maybe do you have any tools that you might suggest for like doing literature review effectively?
Okay, yeah, great question. So yeah, there's a lot of guides out there, and I think we have links to a few websites that give good guides on how to do literature review. I don't like to give wide recommendations on how to do a literature review, given that different disciplines do them differently and there's different ways. But one really good common advice that I've received and I think is really useful is try to be systematic about it. Not in the sense that you have to do a systematic review, but you should still try to keep note or a database of all the literature you read and the notes on it. Using tools that help you with this can be really helpful. So our resources page link this. Research Rabbit is really useful. It like starts to map the literature out really well. Another one that is really helpful just to design your thesis is Notion. I live on Notion for my PhD. Basically, you can create a database of the papers you read with tags for it, something that can help you organize your literature in a way that you can start to see what themes are there and then start to write on it. Reading aimlessly sometimes works for some people, but it's good to try to understand like what is it that you're trying to achieve and try to create a structure for it while you're doing the reading, and you can update the structure as you go on. This is probably the most important thing in a literature review. The other thing that I'd say is literature reviews can be super daunting. Thanks, Ryan. I love the validation I get when you support my tools. The literature reviews can be really daunting task, and so spend a bit of time actually collecting the papers, but don't spend too much time. Try to spend some time, just start getting into the reading. Really, that's the hardest part, is like getting started on the reading. Once you get started, you'll start to see more, and follow the footnotes when you can, so you can find the papers that matter. Another really good tool, and I'm just going to put it in the chat, it's called Elicit, and it's really helpful to help you with narrowing down. So they have it's an AI research assistant that you can talk to or use to help you narrow down your research topic using TP3. And also it is very helpful in basically allowing you to use like a literature review to find niche papers, because you're going to find papers that you don't find on the other tools that I've mentioned. I don't know if my message went through. Did it get sent? If not,
I see it. Yeah. Hopefully others do too.
Awesome.
Yeah, another question we have is kind of continuing on this theme of just advice. Based on your experience in coaching, what are common things or common problems thesis makers overlook or need reminding of in their journeys?
Great question. So for undergrads and master students specifically, their thesis is not always the in all and end all. You have to remind yourself that your thesis is one step in a longer term journey. In the PhD, that's more visible because you're spending 4 years or 3 years on the PhD. But you have to remember that your master's can significantly impact your decision on your long-term career. So your thesis can be a good, like, cheap test to use to test out a certain area that you would like to work in. I'm sure Sophia would be able to confirm that doing a thesis helped her understand whether she wanted to work on biosecurity or not, for example. And so these kind of questions, using your thesis is really important. Even if you don't end up working on the thing you were working on in your thesis, it was important to go through that process to decide that. And you might not have made that decision without that process. That's really important to remember. The second thing to remember is sometimes your thesis is for getting skills that you might not get from other like similar things that are going on within your undergrad or your master's program. The third thing it's based on my experience, one of the most common things and common advice I try to give students is when you're evaluating your fit for research, especially as an undergrad or master's student, most people try to make the common mistake of conflating their enthusiasm for a certain topic with how much they enjoy research methodologies. So I always say the tool that you should use to evaluate whether you are a good fit for research or not is to separate them completely. You should try to evaluate whether you enjoy working with certain research methodologies or not separately to how much you actually enjoy working on that topic. I'm going to give an example. For example, if you are working on an economics degree, I'm just pulling out a random discipline that has come in my head. Sometimes the research methodologies you're using for economic thesis or research can be models or like replication models, or you're running certain sort of models. And maybe you're looking at microeconomic topics within it, and you're someone who really enjoys these microeconomic questions, that such as like when do people decide to give charitable donations, and what like small decisions they make. I'm just giving another, and you're really inspired by this topic, but you realize you don't really enjoy doing the models that much. So when you've separated the evaluation, you can realize that, okay, these models creations is not where you find your most comfort, but rather you enjoy this so much. Then you can adjust your career to start looking at organizations that work on charitable decision making without you having to do the economic research. Now, on the other hand, you could be someone who really enjoyed the models, but doesn't enjoy the research as much for maybe personal reasons. Then you will adjust to change the topic to something that matches your research interest. But now is where it can get really complicated when it comes to your personal decisions, because it's not enough for you to just make a decision on doing research with just interest. When it comes to your PhD, it's really important to choose something that's impactful, because there's going to be days that you absolutely hate doing the research you're doing. It's unavoidable. But on those days, the thing that gets you out of bed is reminding yourself that the work you're doing is important, is impactful, and that's how you can continue doing that research. So it's really important to decide on a topic that you're both motivated by personally at that time and is impactful, rather than just is only impactful or is only personal motivation. So because of that, when you're evaluating on topic, you're evaluating on several things, and that means that you're adjusting on several things. And it's important to adjust on a regular basis. So that's the tool I most commonly advise students to use when they're doing research. I've developed it based on my experience of coaching students. The last advice I can give you if you are doing a PhD is that even in the PhD, this adjustment is an adjustment process of evaluating how you can do it. You have 4 years of a PhD or 3 years of a PhD. You should be self-reflecting. You should be evaluating at the end of every year. How can you adjust your topic to be more impactful, but also whether you still feel like you're a good fit. You don't have to be locked into a PhD. You can leave it if you have to, or you can stay and be motivated to do better research from that and adjust accordingly. So it's important to have that balance. I'm going to stop talking now before we run out of time in case there's any more questions coming in.
I cannot see any questions as of right now, but let me just check one more time. Do you want to maybe end on a piece of advice that you would maybe give, I guess, to like all students everywhere? That's maybe kind of like, I don't know, a helpful thing for us to end on. Yeah.
Great question. Great MC. So I think the best piece of advice I can ever give anyone comes in two folds. The first one is don't reject yourself. Every time you think about applying to something, apply. It's okay if you get rejected. It's better to get rejected by someone else rather than by yourself. Otherwise, you're going in thinking you're not good enough and you don't want to go with that mindset. Rather, you want to go with the mindset that I tried. Someone else thought I wasn't good enough. That's their problem. I will try to improve myself better and get in next time, rather than thinking about why like someone else rejected you. You want to focus on how you can improve yourself. The twofold part of this is that you are also trying to, this means that all opportunities can also be learning opportunities. So just try and apply and do things that work for you. And it's okay if it doesn't work out at sometimes. Like the world will not end if this didn't work out. It's okay. You are doing great and keep going. I think that's the best advice I can give anyone. And I try to use that on myself. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for tuning in today. I think that's the end of the session, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day or night or wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, guys. I'm going to get some ice cream.